And welcome to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. My name is Councillor Adam Stokes and I am the chairman of this board, and Councillor Tom Smith, the vice chairman of the board, is also in attendance. And can I remind you that the audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcasted live via the County Council's website, and all your comments will remain accessible online as the meeting recording remains on the Council's website. And with this in mind, I would like to welcome the members of the public and press watching this live. I would also like to welcome the Executive Councillors and the Executive Support Councillors who are attending our meeting today, and welcome to Debbie Barnes, the Chief Executive, and Andrew Crookham, the Deputy Chief Exec and Executive Director of Resources. I would like to begin with a health and safety announcement. There is no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of a fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber through the doors behind you and leave the building through the reception into the front car park. We then need to wait in the car park for further instructions. Can I remind everyone to ensure their mobiles, laptops and iPads are on silence for the duration of this meeting? And also, when invited to speak, can you please ensure that you switch on your microphone? Otherwise, those attending the meeting via Teams and members of the press and public listening to our meeting online won't be able to hear you. Please be aware that you need to speak directly into the microphones to be heard, and the hearing loop is now activated. Requests to speak will be collated by the Vice Chairman. If you wish to speak during the meeting, can you please raise your hand and Councillor Tom Smith will make a note. We will try to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to ask questions and make contributions. However, I will close down the debate to ensure we keep to time. Therefore, I would appreciate contributions to be succinct and concise, and also ask that you indicate early when you wish to speak. So we'll now move on to the formal agenda. So item 1, apologies for absent and replacement members. Emily, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillors Brockway and Carrington, and we also have Councillor Sear in attendance today as a replacement for Councillor Carrington.
Thank you for that. Item 2 is, do we have any further apologies before I move on? Sorry, no, thank you. Item 2, declarations of members' interests. Members of the board are reminded that they only need to declare any relevant interests which have not been declared on their declaration of pecuniary interest form. Are there any members who wish to declare an interest today? No, thank you. So we'll now move on to item 3, which is minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of November 2023. This is to confirm and sign the minutes from the last meeting of the board on the 30th of November 2023 as a correct record. These can be found on pages 5 to 14 of the agenda pack. Do we have any comments on the minutes, or are we all happy with them? No? Do I have a proposal? Councillor Smith, thank you. A seconder? Councillor Macy. All those in favour, please? Thank you. Do we have any against or abstentions? Thank you. Those minutes are approved. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 4, which is announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillors and Chief Officers. I do not have any announcements to make. How I'd like to point, we have a tight agenda, and that includes the consideration of pre-decision items. I should therefore like to begin by asking those presenting reports to take them as read by members and only summarise key points and the type of input expected by the board. Introductions of reports will be capped at 5 minutes to ensure we have sufficient time to consider and debate. That is my only announcement. Do we have announcements from Chief Officers? No. Right, that's fine, thank you. We'll move on to item 5, which is consideration of call-ins. Emily, are there any call-ins to consider, please?
No, none received, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 6, consideration of councillors' calls for action. Emily, have we received any?
None received.
Thank you for that. So we'll now move on to item 7, which is the submission of business cases for capital funding under the Greater Lincolnshire Devolution Deal. This document extends an invitation to the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board for their consideration and endorsement of a report pertaining to the submission of business cases seeking capital funding under the Greater Lincolnshire Devolution Deal. The proposal advocates for the County Council to present business cases to the Department for levelling up housing and communities for 5 designated projects, intending to secure capital funding within the framework of the Greater Lincolnshire Devolution Deal. The report of the Executive, which can be found on pages 15 to 26, will be debated at their meeting on the 6th of February. So our actions are that we consider the attached report to determine whether the board supports the recommendations to the Executive as set out in the report. and agree any additional comments to be passed on in relation to this item. Comments from today's debate will be shared with the Executive in relation to this item by his designated scrutiny officer. So this report will be presented by Justin Brown, Assistant Director for Growth, and it's over to you, Justin, please. Thank you.
Chairman, thank you very much, and apologies if my voice croaks over the next couple of minutes. So thank you for considering this report, and a quick starting point reminder that in terms of the devolution deal, there is an agreement that if the devolution programme goes ahead, Greater Lincolnshire will receive £24 million a year for the next 30 years with reviews every 5 years. The funding I'm going to talk about in this paper is not part of that long-term strategic funding. It is a short-term one-off contribution that the Department for Levelling Up made to Greater Lincolnshire. So it's a one-off to be spent during 24-25 and doesn't form part of that long-term strategic approach that we will be taking to the funding should devolution go ahead. So in determining the funding that was available, DLUC and ourselves undertook some negotiation around the amount of capital funding, and we finally were awarded £20 million, which is a little bit more than other areas would have received on a per capita basis. So that was good news. The funding itself that I'm talking about today, the £20 million, brings with it two significant caveats that it's important to remember. First one is that the funding can only be used on capital activity. It cannot be used on revenue activity. And the second one is that the funding should be spent in 24-25. So members of OSMB will be very aware that in developing capital projects, it often takes a long time. It takes a long time to procure services, etc. And therefore, the constraint of the time period was significant. So we were balancing those constraints with an objective of trying to allocate funding to all parts of Greater Lincolnshire, and also to respect the priorities in the prospectus that had been submitted to government, which was based around important sectors, around food manufacture, around low carbon, around ports and distribution. You'll see in the report that there are 6 schemes that have been identified as a result of us working across the county council to see which schemes were available, which fit that criteria that I described, and as a result of a series of meetings that we hold regularly with colleagues from district councils, colleagues from universities, colleagues from further education, etc. And that brought us to the 6 projects which are listed in the report at the top of page 20. And I should point out that somewhere in the report there is a typing error that talks about 5 projects. It is indeed 6, and we'll need to make that clear in the final and formal decision making. So the projects are a grant programme to support United Kingdom Food Valley, which are projects which are all about putting investment into technology and university and further education organisations to help our important food businesses to be as productive as possible. Some flood prevention schemes to add extra capital to some of the funding which the council has already agreed in terms of flood prevention. A streetworks programme to improve investment opportunities in the town of Grantham by reducing further the discomfort and difficulty of walking on some of the pavements. So looking at reducing vehicle access and improving public realm. A programme which is about improving the flow of traffic on the A46 around Lincoln as part of trying to encourage trade between the ports at the in North Lincolnshire and North East Lincolnshire and the rest of the Midlands. improvements to Old Roman Bank on the East Coast in order to make green tourism more attractive, and a grant to North Kesteven District Council to deliver further on the Sleaford Moor Enterprise Park. I guess the important thing for this board is to consider risk management. I described the caveats, they are complicated, and I guess one of the things that we are nervous about is that ability to deliver, and that's why we are taking the approach which is described on page 21 of the report, using framework suppliers, reallocating staff tasks, bringing in a program manager who have taken off some work to deliver other activity. I will flag up that the ongoing impact of recent storms means that some of our conversations with partners in water management, notably Environment Agency and Anglian Water, makes me think that we'll have to be really careful about the risk of delivery on that project. But otherwise, most of the risks are within the control of LCC, and therefore they are ones which we will seek to manage through our normal routes. So in summary, 6 projects there. They were determined through the basis of a range of issues, from the criteria for the funding through to conversations with partner organisations. We intend to submit business cases after the executive has taken its decision, assuming the decision the executive takes is that we should do so. We would hope to hear back from government within around 6 weeks, and then it's very much a focus on delivery within that very tight time frame. And I'll leave it there, Chairman.
Thank you for that, Justin. Councillor Marfleet, please.
Put this on. A couple of things in this. Basically it talks about the Lincoln area improvements, and it talks about Carhome Road, Newlands, Freeman Road and Nettleton Roundabout. Well, coming down here, down this hill, I can't remember what it's called now, Longleys and through down to the track, is atrocious. The traffic light system's shockingly bad. You get bunged up right back to the top roundabout and you have to crawl all the way down, and it really just wants the lights looking at and the system looking at, and it blocks everything. I mean, I dread coming down this way because you just can't get through. And it's actually not that bad to sort out, but it just wants actually a bit of attention. Nettleton Roundabout is pretty much the same as Risehome Roundabout, follow the same format. I remember some years ago everybody was on for putting traffic lights on that roundabout, and I actually blocked that one at Overview and Scrutiny, and hence designed this roundabout that's there today, and I actually call it my roundabout because common sense prevailed and we didn't go for traffic lights on a main roundabout going round Lincoln. So that wants to be the same. It wants 2 lanes in, 2 lanes out, and actually move double the traffic flow. And the final other one is Roman Bank. Now, that's a twisty little old single lane. I did speak to Andy Goodson about it. It does need to have walking and cycle route to actually make the coastal offer much better down there. There is no plans in here to support that. It's complicated because it does mean compulsory purchase, and I don't think actually what you're saying in here dovetails to what the conversation I've had with Andy in terms of, because of the cost of trying to put public access and cycleways down there. Now you might have a different plan because I haven't seen the plan, but what I do know is you might have to think differently, and by that there is, with it being a single track, if you look in at Lancashire, they have lanes where basically you have to share, and people, you know, and we might have to make that where cars are aware that you've got families and cyclists walking down there, and therefore don't tear down there at 60 miles an hour on a single lane. And I think it needs looking at properly, because you've got £9 million to actually make a difference here, and we're not going to get that again. And I bike down there, and and actually you struggle, it should be much better for public enjoyment and cycling, especially down that. And that's what we want, is a better offer on that coast, especially in that area of Sandylands through to Skegness. So all three I fully support, but just make sure we get it right. Thank you.
So thank you for those, and we do have people working on all of those. So if you take Old Roman Bank as an example, we have a team from Highways working on carriageway. We also have a team from my department exploring issues around the cycleway, the walkway. We're really focused on the outcomes. We're focused on saying safety, enjoyment, and something to be proud of. In terms of Nettleham and Yarborough Hill as an example, yeah, agreed. And what we are doing is using this funding to deliver those things that we have schemes for at the moment. As I described at the start of the paper, there is other funding in the long term that will be used in a more strategic way. We are working with colleagues in the Highways Department on design of a set of schemes that we would hope to bring into the Strategic Investment Fund or into the DFT funding into the future. So we are absolutely taking the view that you describe of saying long-term, strategic, and make sure we get it right. So hopefully we shall.
Thank you, Justin. Councillor Brooks, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a query about how the schemes are assessed, carrying on from what Justin was saying in his address to the committee. And I accept about the Balancing Act, time constraints and the ability to deliver. But I understand that Boston Borough Council submitted 3 schemes for consideration by the County Council to get for this money, or some of this money, to be used on. And they're obviously extremely disappointed that none of those schemes have found their way through into the recommendation today. And I note that the report says that officers were unable to identify other schemes which met the criteria and were deliverable, etc., which you were going through. But so am I right in assuming that the Boston Borough schemes didn't meet the criteria or weren't deliverable in time, or some other reason within those constraints, or those reasons that you assessed the schemes against? And if so, will feedback be given to the councils, to Boston Borough Council on those schemes, but also other councils will have submitted schemes as well for consideration? Will there be some feedback to them as to why their schemes never found their way through into this recommendation? Because I'm sure it's not just in Boston Borough. I picked it up from their meeting in Boston and some of their councillors who have had a word with me about it. So that's why I'm asking the question here, because I think it is important that they do understand the reasons why their schemes have not gone forward, because it is casting a negative on the devolution consultation, certainly in Boston. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. And I guess the first thing to say is that the UK Food Valley programme would be hugely surprising if it was not delivering support in the Boston area, given the importance of the food sector. Yes, we received 3 submissions from Boston. Each were single line in an email. One was for some land acquisition of brownfield land. Now, quite simply, Department of Levelling Up funding that we are getting is not allowed to be used for brownfield land site acquisition. So that was not one we would pursue, because the government would have said, sorry, you cannot have that money. The second one was an extension and fit out of the leisure centre, and there were two challenges to us there. The first one was that we had set out very clearly that we would look to support projects which were from the or initiatives from the prospectus, and the prospectus did not include leisure and health in it because it was very focused on business sectors. The second issue that I was considering with that leisure centre scheme is that the Department for Levelling Up did not want their funding to be used in a way which blurred the lines with other grants they had already given. So because the Borough Council had already received Towns Fund for the leisure centre, I think it was Towns Fund, may have been Levelling Up Fund, but it was one of the Levelling Up Department's funds. Bringing further Levelling Up funding into the mix would probably have led to the department saying, we don't think this one is one to be funded. The third priority, and these were given in a priority list by Boston Borough Council, was for some seed funding for a local development order for 3 new employment sites. So we were nervous that the development of a local development order is a revenue-based piece of expenditure, not a capital piece of expenditure. And through the regular meetings that my team have with colleagues in the Boston team, we were not aware of 3 new employment sites that were coming forward. Now, I have no doubt that there are aspirations for those sites to come forward, but schemes that we're not aware of at a time when you're working to a very, very tight time frame created a risk for us. We spoke with officials from Boston and explained that in a meeting, and Debbie, as chief exec, wrote to her counterparts explaining the strategy of what we're doing. But I think what you've raised is an important point, that communication needs to work in a way that everybody hears and understands and so on. So I think we take an important learning point about saying, do we need to communicate that again and also get that right across the whole of the area? So we'll do that, but hopefully my answer gives you an explanation of the decision process that we went through.
Yes, thank you for that explanation. And I omitted to say at the end there that I do accept that the Food Valley grant will or should benefit Boston and South Holland. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to come in on that point, Councillor Hill, or just generally?
Yes, I mean, I think there is, I think Justin has given a very good explanation as to the reasoning of the decisions were made. I think it's important to note that we received £20 million for the county council area as a, I suppose you could call as a reward for entering the devolution process and starting the consultation. I think people should remember that actually this is, if this deal does go through, this is it will get more than that every single year for 30 years. So I think the issue is, although at this time it wasn't able to give Boston money out of this tranche, I'm sure in the future, if we did have a devolution deal and an elected mayor, I'm sure the chances of Boston getting by definition, that Boston will, of course, as being part of Greater Lincolnshire, and the money we will receive, not only the 24 million, but also the other ability to get projects in, for example, starting a Boston bypass, if you like. That is much more likely if you had a mayoral combined authority, because it's clear from other parts of the country that that does give you more heft with government. There is an unfortunate narrative in Boston, which I'm sure is politically based, that somehow they've been neglected and ignored by the county council, and indeed by everybody else. That actually is not true. We've done some substantial work over the past, looking at what we've done in Boston over the years, and if you look over a reasonable period, you'll see that people will see that we have invested in Boston. For example, improving the John Adams Way, and recently, as part of the one of the levelling up bids, roundabout just south of Boston has been improved. And indeed, Boston has had two slugs of 20 million, had 40 million pounds now from levelling up stroke towns deals. So I don't think it could honestly say with a straight face that the town has been neglected. But I'm sure if this deal does go ahead, there'll be greater opportunities for us to invest in Boston. I think one of the things that Justin didn't mention is the rules are quite strict in terms of how quickly you have to get these deals done, which does make it very difficult. Typically for these sort of arrangements, government will say, well, you've got to get it finished or within a certain period. So it does actually constrict very considerably what we can do. And in the past, we had more investment plans for Boston, which other levelling up bids, which unfortunately couldn't be delivered within the timescale. If we do get a devolution deal, we will be in control of the greater Lincolnshire area, so those constraints which government puts on us will go, and we'll have more flexibility. But obviously we're in consultation. I understand the Borough Council is not in favour of having a devolution deal. Well, that's their democratic choice. But what I slightly resent is the fact the justification was that somehow Boston is being neglected, which I don't think is really stands up to scrutiny. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lee, please.
Thanks. I've got 3 points I'd like to raise. First of all, there's mention of 1.5 million for extra money for flooding. Can I ask, because Executive recently allocated some money for flooding, will this 1.5 million be on top of that money that we allocated? That's good. That's good. That's because we all know we've got to spend more, and I know that's a priority for all of us.
Just for everyone, that is the answer is yes. Just
yeah. That was the first one. Then my second point, going to page 20, where it starts to talk in Lincoln about Netlin Roundabout and some of the highway stuff. I'm not going to tell you how to spend the money and what to do because I'm not a highways engineer. I don't know if you need traffic lights or not. I'm sure highways engineers are the best people to decide those on the roadworks. The first thing I wanted to ask was there's mention of resurfacing work on Carhome Road. I believe that there's already some work planned there, I believe. And what I want to know is this extra to that work, or are you reusing that money? You know, is this extra money for that? Can I have some written feedback, please, about the detail of where all this resurfacing will be outside of this meeting? And I can't fail to bring up the Bailgate area needs resurfacing. We all saw the media last weekend, and I don't think it's the fault of highways officers. It's about politicians' priorities. And for me, the resurfacing of the Bailgate area would be a priority. It's not in there, and I would ask why it's not in there. Then my last question is very similar to what Councillor Brooks has said. When you look at the breakdown of these figures, most of these projects have got 1.5, 2, or Lincoln's got 3 million, and I'm glad about that. I wish we'd got more, but, you know, we've got 3 million. You've allocated 9 million to Roman Bank. That's 3 times anything else. I'm right in thinking at the top of the report. Can I ask why? Because that's an awful lot more than anyone else is getting. Who's decided those priorities and determined that allocation or share of funding? And again, can I have written feedback on how these priorities were determined and the allocation? I would like absolutely full, because I appreciate this is OSMB, but I'd like some really full, detailed information on all of this, please, because I think it's really important. Devolution is a big deal for all of us, and it's got to be seen to be open and transparent. And to me, this is very much on the surface. It's not really telling me where the money's going or how we've decided what the priorities are. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And so in terms of the resurfacing, so on, yes, I will arrange for a briefing note for you. One of the things that we have to do in any scheme that goes to Levelling Up Department is show a benefit cost ratio. And by including some of the resurfacing schemes in addition to the development of Netlin Roundabout, it helps the economists at the Department for Levelling Up to support the projects. I also think it's really important, and the Lincoln Transport Strategy shows it, that there's interconnections between junctions and roads. So queuing up on Carhome Road can at times have a significant impact several miles away and so on. So we wanted to make sure that our business plan took the issues that were in the Lincoln Transport Strategy and agreed and described how overall they will make a difference rather than simply say it's this particular piece of road. In terms of Bailgate, I'm working with colleagues in Highways, as I said earlier, to develop a programme of activity that we would look to be bringing into future bidding rounds, either to the Mayoral Investment Fund or to other DFT financiers. And clearly Bailgate is getting to a point where we need to look at that and so on. So we're having conversations about there. In terms of the scale of Roman Bank compared to other schemes, this all goes back to that pragmatic challenge we had of saying what can be delivered on the ground in that period. Work had already been done on Roman Bank. We already knew the figures, we knew the programme, and therefore it fitted the criteria. So it's very much a pragmatic programme about delivery over the next 12 months, with a view that we take a bit more of a strategic approach into the long-term strategic programme that Councillor Hill described.
Can I just come back briefly, Chair? I'd like it noted for the record that I would like to have seen the resurfacing of Bailgate on this list, and to give 9 million to one area and give 3 million to Lincoln doesn't feel fair to me. So I would just like it noted for the record that I have asked for that going forward. I think that should be an absolute priority because that affects Lincoln's tourism, businesses, everything. And it's the jewel in Lincoln's crown and it really does need resurfacing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hill, please.
Thank you. I think, I think Councillor Lee is quite right to bang the drum for her own area. She's well aware that the Bailgate, there was some years ago now, there's a massive investment in putting the sets there, and obviously the problem has been that although we were assured that they wouldn't, lorries driving over them, heavy vehicles, wouldn't damage the sets. That has not proved to be the case. I hear what she says about not being in the 9 million going to one part of the county. It's a bit of a strange one, this, because we had to indicate to the department, levelling up department, what our proposed programme is. But obviously, this is obviously the opportunity now where this committee can decide whether it approves or not of the list put in front of them. So I'll probably have to ask the Chief Executive this. If somebody wants to propose a different version, I'm not sure is that practical or not. And what I would say when we talked about Boston earlier, if you go to Boston, in fact, if you go to anywhere in the county, they all tell me, well, all the money goes to Lincoln, doesn't it? And there's, you've got all those bypasses and you've got this, you've got that. It's not actually true, but there is a perception out there that all the money, the county council money and everybody else's money all goes to Lincoln and we get nothing. And it's quite amusing everywhere, including Lincoln. I mean, there is tonight, this afternoon, there's the public drop-in meeting in Lincoln itself, and I'm sure Lincoln will say, from people coming from Lincoln will say, well, the money's never coming to Lincoln, it goes everywhere else. So I suppose that's life. But I do take the point, and I think you've got a very valid point about the sets up there, and it is an ongoing problem, and we'll do that. But I'll ask the Chief Exec do we have any flexibility? Does this committee have any flexibility to change anything in reality? It's a really quite tightly controlled process, shall we put it like, by the government.
It is a really tightly controlled process, and there's two steps to it, I suppose. And I think the first thing that's worth highlighting is that, as Justin said when he introduced the paper, this isn't devolution money. This is contingency money that the Department for Levelling Up have given us, and therefore they also want tight control over it, which is in a different position should a devolution deal be agreed through this council and a decision made. So just to be clear. So you may remember that the list of projects were part of the paper that went to full council in December. And at full council in December, one of the recommendations which was agreed and carried at full council was to give delegated authority to myself to approve any minor amendments to the draft proposals or consultation arrangements, and the delegation to be exercised in consultation with the leader, and obviously any amendments would need to be in line with the constitution. So I'd need to get David's advice as to whether including that in the scheme would be perceived to be a minor amendment, or whether it would need to go back through the decision making. But notwithstanding that, because obviously it is DLUC money, and because it's contingency money, not devolution money, we would also have to go back to them to get an agreement to change them. I don't know whether Justin wants to come in on that. So it is complicated.
I think the other thing I would add is going back to the deliverability. As I described, we're working on a programme at the moment, but sorry. It's all these public meetings we've been to. The deliverability is a real challenge in terms of the funding. I don't think that we would be able to deliver the Bailgate scheme in 24-25. That doesn't mean it isn't an important scheme that we would like to take a more strategic approach to. So I would need to get some reassurance from the team in Highways about whether it were deliverable before we then went through the processes with the department, and we would need to conclude all of that within about 6 weeks, which feels a bit tight.
Thank you. Councillor Kendrick, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just looking at Sleaford Moor Enterprise Park, and I see that it says in the report there are significant barriers affecting the viability of Phase 2, notably archaeology. I was just wondering if I could be given a bit more information about what these barriers are, and in particular the reference to archaeology. Thanks, Chairman.
So most rural industrial estates cannot sell the land at a viable price, which is why we in the public sector, whether it's at district council or county council level, will often need to invest in the site. Now, when the archaeologists did the dig on Sleaford Moor Enterprise Park, the section that is to the west of the site from the existing properties towards the Holdingham roundabout has a number of architectural finds very close to the surface, and the cost of dealing with those would mean that it would be extremely unviable for businesses to come in and buy serviced land, which means that they will look elsewhere. So the idea behind this scheme, and I will have more detail when my colleagues in North Kesterton provide me with the business plan, which I think is Wednesday or Thursday next week, they're targeted to do it, is to use the grant for those abnormal extra costs of archaeology. That will then enable them to put in an access road and electricity and water supply in and out of a number of other locations, which will then enable private businesses to be able to consider buying for developing their units at a price which would be reasonable. Otherwise, the price that the businesses would be expected to pay would mean that they simply wouldn't be able to buy it.
Thank you. Do we have any further comments from the board? Councillor Dilks, please.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I sympathise with Councillor Lee about Lincoln and the 9 million, and you know, I'm South Kesterton and we only get 2 million, but it's a balance, isn't it? And they all look like worthy projects, I've got to say, you know. And I appreciate the Sandylands one about the, you know, the coastal path. I think it is important to be promoting Lincolnshire as a tourist destination, so I kind of see that, but I also see the Lincoln Pool. I've sympathy with the Boston pleas, particularly over the leisure centre. I've got to say, if you can't find any schemes to spend the money. I know of a leisure centre that could use the money, and I'll guarantee that it will be spent by April next year. It's in my ward, by the way. You wouldn't be surprised to know. 2 points of sort of clarification, if I may ask, and forgive me, Justin, if you picked this up on your introduction, I may not have heard it. But in the paper, both for today and for the executive, I notice it mentions 5 projects, and then lists the 6. I just want to clarify, it is 6, is it? We will get all 6. We expect to get all 6 if this deal goes through, yeah? That's the first point. I'll carry on to the second, if I may. And of course, while we all welcome money coming into Lincolnshire, and I note that these projects have been chosen for their clear local need, but that need is whether or not we have a devolution deal or not. That isn't sort of subject, but I also notice what the Chief Executive says, this is not devolution money, but can you clarify that if the devolution deal doesn't go through, we won't get this money? That's right, isn't it? You know, I just want to be absolutely sure on that. I mean, just looking at that, I heard Councillor Hill, and he chose his words very carefully, I thought, in describing it as a reward. Some might actually describe it as something else, a word beginning with B, a bribe. Particularly given the tight rules that we'd have to... So I think my final question on it is, what happens, and I see that the paper's got the caveats in about the risks of not delivering, but can we be absolutely clear, if we don't spend the money by April 25, if this goes through and we get it, presumably we're handing money back, are we?
Get the money no matter what.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sorry.
I just seek
So
that.
the money is not conditional of a deal being agreed. So
right.
It's like a reward. So
it's just for the negotiations. Okay, then, yeah.
So just to enter the consultation, we have been allocated this money. Yeah, that's...
So we get that anyway, Mark. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I will find a way of correcting the typing error about 5 and 6. I failed O-level maths. And yeah, as Councillor Hill says, the funding is available now. It's not contingent on anything else. And we will work as hard as we can to get it delivered. And if we have to start negotiating with government towards the end of the deal, we'll try, but we really want to avoid that at all costs.
Thank you for both those replies, particularly on the this thing. I had, when I first read the paragraph, I thought we were going to be in the awful position of having to vote on which of the 5 that we wanted of these projects, which would be not a comfortable place for any of us, I think. But thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dilks. Yeah, I've got a couple of points. So with regards to the tight deadline, how confident are we as a council that we can do this? I mean, I know that you've said we've got these schemes, they're ready to go, but there can still be delays within that. Will there be any flexibility from DoLook to say, look, we've started the scheme, it's ongoing, we're going to overrun by a little, say, a couple of months? Would they still allow that to continue?
So they say not. And I have to take them at face value, and as well in terms of our credibility. You know, we've taken some decisions based on pragmatic delivery. So a bit like the point Councillor Brooks was raising, you know, why haven't all the schemes been taken forward? It would be a shame if we were to run very, very late and turn around to people who we'd said, no, you can't have that money. So at the moment, they're taking quite a firm line, and we are working on the assumption that we've got to really, really get their money spent.
Thank you for that. And also, well, let's hope we can do that then. I certainly will welcome a improvement to the walking route in Grantham. I certainly welcome the 2 million to Grantham. I know some district councillors within Grantham do not welcome that, but I certainly do. I think there's going to be, we definitely need improvements in that area. It's in my county division, and when you come out the train station, you do not know where you're going. So if we can improve that, will definitely be good. Are there any further comments? No? So I will move that the board supports the recommendations details on page 17 and 18 of the report. We've obviously got Councillor Lee's extra input. Councillor Lee.
I'm going to abstain, but I'd like it noted for the record. The reason for abstaining is that I think when you've got 20 million and you give 9 of that to one project, that doesn't feel like a fair share out. They're all great projects, and I think the 9, you know, that one is as well, but on that basis and on the basis that I'll wait to hear about the Bailgate resurfacing, but as an addition, not instead of what's already there. Thank you.
No, thank you for your clarification. So I will move from, as I'll go back to, I'll move the board supports the recommendations details on page 17 and 18 of the report. And I ask that our comments are captured by Kiara, our designated scrutiny officer, be shared with the executive ahead of its consideration of a decision. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Macy, thank you. All those in favour, show your hands, please. Thank you. Do we have any against? And obviously we've got Councillor Lee's abstention that's noted. Right, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Justin. So we'll now move on to item 8, which is the Council Budget 24-25. So during its session on the 9th of January, the Executive sanctioned the budget proposals outlined in the report as the favoured choice for consultation. The detailed description of these proposals can be found in the report to the Executive provided in Appendix A of our report today. Our actions are that we consider and comment upon the Executive's budget proposals as set out in Appendix A. And this report will be presented by Michelle Grady, please. Michelle.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So, as you said, this is part of the consultation process for the proposed budget put forward by the Executive in January the 9th. The report was brought together following information from and updates from the government on the autumn statement and the provisional settlement that we received before Christmas. These were all in line with previous indications that we'd received from the government, so there was no more money when those announcements were made to cover the national living wage uplift, which had created a significant pressure from our original assumptions. We did have some increases in adult social grants at that point, but that was offset by a reduction in other grants that have been provided to cover inflation. It also confirmed the council tax referendum limit for councils, for county councils, was no more than 5%, with 2% of that being the adult social care precept. Page 41 of your report, Table A, sets out our medium-term financial position summary based on a 2.99% increase of council tax each year, and that demonstrates the deficit position that would be in place of 7 million for 24-5 because of the pressures that we've got rising to 15 million over the 4-year period of that plan, which would require a £49 million use of reserves to meet that budget gap. This clearly is a challenge for the affordability of our services going forward, where costs and demand continue to rise. So the revenue details for 24-5 are set out in Table B, and the cost pressures that this identifies is £60 million and savings and income £19 million. The pressures in the report state that these mainly relate to contract and pay inflation, service cost and demand, particularly in social care services and school transport. In terms of saving, we've adopted an approach to business process improvement to avoid service reductions and improve our efficiency in the way we do our work. Table E in the report sets out the medium-term position based on council tax increases of 3 different options, so at 2.99%, 3.99% and 4.99%, with each of them requiring a use of reserve over that 4-year period, ranging from 49 million at the most down to 18 million based on a 4.99% increase. Just to note that each 1% of council tax generates £3.7 million of funding, year-on-year funding, and that obviously has quite a key impact on the base costs of the council. Table F gives a breakdown of the reserves that we hold, with earmarked reserves being those that we can use to support budget deficits over that period, and the financial volatility reserve that we currently hold to support that is 47 million. The capital programme is updated in the report, so the use of the capital contingency to add new schemes into the programme, and clearly the Executive made some decisions before Christmas when we brought our in-year report to move some items into the capital programme to use some one-off income items in the current year. What we haven't done is added to the size of the programme, requiring us to make any new borrowing, so that sustains the long-term affordability of the programme. Just to point out that during the discussion at Executive on the 9th of January, given that the deficits that we were talking about at that point, the Executive were minded to propose a 4.99% increase in council tax as the basis of consultation. I'll just point out that clearly yesterday there were some announcements made around funding for councils, and we do expect to receive some money as part of that announcement. We won't know the exact details of those amounts until we get our settlement, but I think the point to make on that is they are one-off announcements. They're one-off announcements to support the social care pressures that the government's obviously hearing local government in terms of the pressures that local government's receiving. So our decisions and proposals need to make sure that the base for the council is on a steady basis going forward. I'm quite happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Michelle. Do you have any questions? Councillor Lee, please.
Thanks. You did touch on it, Michelle, because you knew I'd ask it, didn't you? Mr Gove found the magic money tree yesterday and gave councils 500 million. It's a pity he didn't find it a bit sooner, really, isn't it? And I think a few people have made that observation. And having had finance training, I understand the predicament totally now. And I just wondered, does this mean that we still need to put the council tax up that much? Because obviously people are in the middle of a cost of living crisis still. No one's got any money. If we don't have to put it up that much, I wouldn't want to. But I should think what we're going to get probably doesn't even touch the sides, does it?
I think we've just worked through some assumptions on what we think, and I think it would sort out the problem for next year. But what you have is those pressures, so the cost of national living wage, the cost of the demand on services is there as a year-on-year pressure. So if we didn't maximise our council tax, that would create probably a double the size of the gap that we would have forecast in the report for year 2, so 25-26 onwards. And clearly we're not in a position to know what our funding is going to be or any change to the spending review period for that point.
Councillor Hill, you want to come in?
I mean, obviously, I was at CCN meeting yesterday, and the Simon Hall, the local government minister, was there. And obviously, it's as Michelle said, although there is this announcement, it was a ministerial announcement yesterday, and 500 million, and an indication of how that 500 million would be allocated according to a certain formula. And as Michelle has said, until we actually get the settlement formally, which I believe will be, I mean, the problem we've got, the executive will meet next week, I think, isn't it? And I'm not sure we'll have had the final settlement by then. So it's a bit of a dilemma. So do we, you know, I suppose my view is and of course the other thing we might have had, hopefully we'll have, is the district council returns. But it is a difficult one. So I think we're going to be in a stage where you can't guarantee you're going to get any, you know, until we get the final settlement, when there may be other negative things in there which we don't know about, we just don't know. So I think my sort of, I haven't thought this through finally yet, but I think the executive will probably have to stick to its original, I mean, that's a discussion we'll have, and obviously we'll hear what the committee says today. And then when we do get the final settlement, I suspect there will be a debate at the council about what we do with that extra one-off money. It is very much one-off money, and I think that will be an interesting discussion we should all have. But I don't think, looking over at Andrew, that the executive can presume anything until we get that final settlement. But it will be an interesting debate as to what we do with that if we get this extra money.
Andrew?
Yeah, I'll just come in on the back of the leader. Yes, I think my advice will be to present a report into executive on the 6th of February that's based on the facts of what we know. So hopefully by that point we will have heard from the district councils for the council tax base information and surplus or deficits on collection funds related to council tax and the business rate collection figures. So we're expecting those on the 31st of January. So that the paper might need to have an addendum to it on the 6th, depending on the timing of that. But also as well, there are different formulae that the grants can be split up on. We can make a good guess what they might be, but given the fact it's one-off money, I think it's better that members are discussing correct information to make correct decisions, and it might be that ultimately leaks into the council meeting on the 23rd of February.
Thank you. Councillor Lee, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, just to say, I totally understand that and I could support that. I just think it's really unfortunate that we got this money this late, but I can see that you have to plan and I don't want to see cuts to services, so thank you.
Yeah, I mean, just, sorry, Chairman, on that, this is not quite unprecedented, but normally there is very little, usually the provisional and the final hardly ever vary, but this, and you know, there has been a lot of cross-party work with the County Council network in particular, where the made a very strong case to government that in terms of, if you remember, the national living wage increase, extra increase wasn't funded, and obviously the issue with adult care, with SEND and homeschool transport, issues like that, where a very strong case was made to government. 40 MPs actually wrote publicly to the Chancellor, I believe, to say something needs to be done. So it was a very good, successful campaign. It is only one-off money, but at least it does show that sometimes these things can be addressed. But I think the other view is that there is still quite a lot of pessimism around that whoever the next government is, and I think the Treasurer Andrew has explained this to us, the national figures are that we're expecting pretty tough times, whichever government comes in, because they have very limited scope for helping. But I don't know, Andrew, you just want to remind people about that.
Yeah, so thanks, Chair. So just to build on what Councillor Hill said, so the national financial position as set out through the various decisions that the national government's made, clearly there is a big pot of cash, but the extent that departments are protected, such as health, education and what have you, based on that overall pot of available money, departments like local government which aren't protected, there is essentially a reduction in money available after 25-26, which we think to be in the region of around about 3 to 3.5%, which we've got reflected in the plan, because they're the facts that we've got at our fingertips. Something in the region of a reduction of around £6 to £9 million, depending on the base of the figure that we use. So yeah, a challenging period ahead and difficult decisions for that next government to make.
Thank you for that. Is there any more questions? Vice Chairman, please.
Thank you, Chairman. With your indulgence, I've got 4. I will try and be succinct. Point 1.44, page 44, it states the following, and I quote, "The earmark reserve, which for the benefit of the webcast is the financial volatility reserve, is available to support budget deficits arising over the medium term and will allow us time to transition to a lower cost base if this is required after funding reforms are implemented," close quote. What is the risk of the Council having to transition to a lower cost base? And if we are left with no option, what will be the implications for our services? Secondly, Chairman, I note the report says there is a yearly increase in working age adults needing care at a rate between 3 to 4%. And the paragraph refers to mental health care costs. Do we know what the full cost implications of an additional 3 to 4% yearly increase are for adult care, and especially around mental health costs as well? Also, there is obviously an impact of financial savings that the many thousands of unpaid carers have on the council in a positive sense. Do we have any data on the impact that they have when they are potentially caring for those who have these conditions? It meant, thirdly, Chairman, it says enhanced benefit in income basically will not be isn't counted when certain assessments are done. Does that include some things like basically war disablement pension and the Armed Forces Compensation Scheme? Because it's not an occupational pension, it's basically an private injury pension, if you like, but it's public because it's through injury through service. And finally, Chairman, could officers advise how much of the cost pressure in relation to children in care is accountable due to our responsibilities that we have under the National Transfer Scheme? Thank you.
So it's quite a lot to unpack there. So I'll start from the top, and I might have to pass over to others for that, or come back to you, Councillor Smith. So in terms of the financial volatility reserve, we've clearly set out the use of reserves that would be required should we have a deficit position going forward. I think that some of the announcements yesterday would probably clear some of the use of that requirement of that use of reserve for 24/5, but clearly there is still use required going forward. The aim of the reserve is to give us time to make adjustments to our budgets and our services should we need to. We always look for efficiencies first, but clearly that financial volatility reserve of 47 million is there, and currently we're projecting a use of that as in full over the 4 years should we keep the council tax at 3%, but that was before the announcements yesterday. So that is very much there to try and smooth any path to a reduced level of service for the funding required for the services that we provide. The mental health costs I can't comment on. I think that's maybe something I can come back to you with. And again, the carers is not something I'm just going to pass to Debbie to see if she can answer some of those questions for you. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a feeling that a lot of really challenging questions. So thank you very much. And I'm sure between the three of us we'll respond to what we can now and then obviously get back to you. So in relation to learning disability and mental health, working age adults, the pressures, as you said, are increasing in terms of the numbers, but also include in terms of the residential costs as well. So from inflation, national living wage. So we're seeing both. Justin will have that detail. I don't have it to hand in terms of what the impact would be of 3%, but we can follow up with Justin and provide that to the committee. Second one is absolutely, we have an army of unpaid carers who do wonderful, wonderful support to their loved ones. We do provide support for carers, as you know, through our various different services. We haven't got any national data in terms of what that saves, but there are some national surveys, sorry, we haven't got local data, but there are national surveys which obviously could then be extrapolated in terms of what the army of unpaid carers across the country provide, which I'm happy to get and share. I don't have the information at my fingertips, but happy to share that. The other one that I can answer, and it's not the Armed Forces benefits one, is in relation to the children in care pressures and the National Transfer Scheme. So this is anybody who is assessed to be under the age of 18, then they are allocated out to local authorities in terms of migrants arriving. They're allocated out through the National Transfer Scheme to local authorities. Through the National Transfer Scheme, because they tend to arrive down in the south of the county, mainly Kent, they are age assessed there and then obviously put into the National Transfer Scheme. We receive a grant which does cover the costs. So that isn't a cost to Lincolnshire residents. However, those that are found in Lincolnshire, or those that are placed in the hotels in Lincolnshire, or those that will, should Scampton open, be placed in Scampton, need to be age assessed before they go into the National Transfer Scheme or until we provide care for them. The actual undertaking of the age assessment is not funded. We would have to meet that fund, albeit we are negotiating additional funding in relation to Scampton. But the bigger cost, which is once they come into care, we receive a grant for. So again, it isn't a cost to Lincolnshire residents. And the final question around the benefits, I think I'm handing it back to Michelle.
I'll have a go at that one. So the income we collect for contributions to adult social care is assessed on financial assessments. We increase those rates according to very clear guidelines each year, and any income contribution that people, any increase that people get in terms of their DWP pensions and things like that, or assessed DWP contributions, the income contribution is increased by that rate. I would be surprised if there was very specific items in there that you've included, but I can check that. But it's in line with the kind of state pension and other DWP benefits.
Thank you. That'd be very helpful on that one, Michelle, because they are benefits, but they're not DWP benefits. They are administered by the Ministry of Defence, and it's the equivalent of an injury pension, basically. And some things they are taken into account for, and some they're not. So it'd be very helpful to know that information. On the point that Councillor Lee made and that the leaders made, and I think it's important. None of us in the ideal world would sit here and go, oh yes, let's raise council tax by 4% so our residents have to pay more council tax. None of us want to do that. But the government have, in another place, we've had a similar discussion where I'm a district councillor, and the government have been very clear, which is you are expected to use your reserves and you are expected to up council tax by the maximum, and if you don't come to us with a begging bowl and ask for money, because the answer is you're not having any. So I think, Chairman, we haven't got an alternative. As much as I would love to sit here and say, yes, there's an alternative, if we want to keep providing services, especially not, and I refer to the non-statutory services, so things like how many potholes we fix here, how much drainage works we do in a year, then unfortunately we have to go with the recommendation, Chairman, which is the 4% rise in council tax. And I'm quite happy on that basis, Chairman, to propose that. But I'm aware, obviously, others may wish to speak.
Yeah, we'll hold that thought. Councillor Smith, do we have any further comments from the board? Councillor Hill, please.
There are some conditions with the 500 million. One is it is specifically for social care services. It should not, clear instruction, it should not be put into reserves, because the government obviously is observing nationally what all councils hold in reserves. And I mean, the council tax one's an interesting one. So if, you know, because obviously the truth of the matter is there are many other councils in the country who are in dire straits with their issues with, certainly with their CND, social care funding. We are not in that position. I think we congratulate the officers and actually the decisions that we've made as councillors over the years that we're not in that position. It is a struggle. It's not. I won't say it's. This is wonderful, and certainly the Heather Sandy, who's the children's director, is clear. We're just about all right, but it is getting increasingly challenging. So those are the criteria. I just thought I'd let people know that that's where it is. So if we then put a load of money into reserves, I think that would be frowned upon very much by government.
Thank you for that information. Do we have any further comments from the board? I've got one, which is just on page 45, and it relates to the £3.2 million cost pressure for the delivery of educational transport. I am concerned that this is becoming, shall I say, a money pit. We just keep throwing money and money into this, and we'll probably have to continue to do that to meet our statutory requirements. I'm just wondering if there's been further lobbying by the County Council's network to ensure that we can actually put a ceiling on this.
There has been lobbying, and actually there has been a sort of a report. I think Debbie will know more about this than me. CCN commissioned a report to look about the issues of CCN and what could be done. I think the truth of the matter is not a lot, but the report did have some suggestions about sort of changing criteria and all the rest of it. But it's one of those things where you have a statutory right. I mean, obviously you could start looking at some of the national criteria, and again, I think that point has been made, but it is a money pit, and at the moment we just have to keep funding it, but like everybody else. And our bill has gone up to 10 million in about a few years. It is quite horrendous, actually.
Yeah, the CCM report is definitely worth a read. I'll send it round to committee. So they do look at the criteria. The home to school transport legislation hasn't been updated since 1944. So I think the world has changed significantly. They do recommend looking at means testing in that report. So happy to send it round because I think it does come up with some quite radical ideas that probably do need discussion at some point.
Andrew?
And just to add one further point on it as well, whilst acknowledging it is a money pit and the costs are going up, we are internally doing work on transformation in that area. So this has been an ongoing transformation project to eat into those costs. So there's been cost avoidance that we've sort out as part of the budget process, but also as well, Michelle referenced in her introduction around the business performance improvement programme, that the process for educational travel will be part of that programme as well, so we can probably start to use these reports to report back on all the transformation updates that we've got to provide assurance.
Yeah, that would be great if we can do that, please. Are there any further comments? No? So we have got a proposal by the Vice Chairman to support the budget proposals. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Kendrick, thank you. So we will now take a vote on that. All those in favour, please. As everyone's voted, that's unanimous, so there's no abstentions or none against. Thank you for your contributions. So we'll now move on to item 9, which is service, revenue and capital budget proposals 24-25. The report discusses budget proposals for service, revenue and capital budgets within resources and corporate services, which are under consideration alongside the Council's overall budget for 24-25. Addressing challenges in the economic context, these proposals include adjustments for increased service costs and significant planned cost reductions, with the Executive having approved these proposals as its preferred option for further consultation on the 9th of January, providing the Board with an opportunity to scrutinise and comment before the final budget proposals are made on the 6th of February. So our actions are that we consider and comment upon the contents of the report, and this report will be presented by Adam Hopley, the Strategic Finance Lead Corporate. Over to you, Adam, please.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, members. So as part of the budget setting process, each scrutiny committee scrutinises the budget proposals relevant for their area. OSMB performs the role for resources and corporate services, and therefore I'm here to present the report as just been outlined now, which specifically considers the budget proposal and associated adjustments for the Resources Directorate, and it includes corporate services as well. So Michelle's just presented the Council budget report, which sets out the position for the whole Council. The report I'm presenting also contains some of this context and is especially relevant when it's considered as a standalone item. However, given Michelle has just gone through a lot of that, I won't repeat that again for the purposes of this one, but just an explanation of what that is. But I will just focus on the areas most specific for resources and corporate. So within the report itself, I'd like to draw your attention to Table 8 on page 89. This table sets out the change in proposed budget by service area within resources and corporate. Table A shows that there's cost pressures totaling 3.5 million and cost reductions amounting to 4.4 million contained within the budget proposal. The detail which supports the cost pressures can be seen on the following page and generally tend to fall into 4 key areas. So contract inflation, measures to strengthen IT operations, increased demand and all others in a sense. So just taking each in turn. So for contract inflation, the Directorate has a high amount of contracted spend with several commissioned services, which support the delivery of its services. So support services, property maintenance being 2 examples of those areas. Those contracts tend to have inflation mechanisms inbuilt, and therefore the cost has increased as a result of the rate of inflation remaining higher for longer than originally expected 12 months ago. In total, this is expected to increase our costs by around £1.5 million. With regards to the IT service, over the past 12 months there's been a comprehensive review of the IT delivery model, which has led to the identification of a series of changes to ensure a strengthened approach to service delivery and security as well. So as referenced within this report, it does refer to sort of leadership and security. The identified costs are in the region of about 0.8 million, although it should be noted that the service have mitigated this in part through the achievement of additional savings, which are also considered within this report. Grouping the sort of the rest together, the Directorate is generally considered to be a key enabler of success in our frontline services and enables the Council to meet its statutory duties well. So in doing so, a series of changes to the cost base within resources are proposed. So that includes within commercial in terms of ensuring a strengthened permanent establishment. Within finance, which references the impact of the Redmond review of external audit scrutiny. So there'll be additional external audit scrutiny and cost, which the budget proposal reflects. And within property as well, associated around compliance management, which has also previously been brought to the Executive. Moving on to the next paragraph within the report, that sort of focuses on the major cost reductions which are planned, of which there are several. In terms of the key ones, the first one, which is the biggest one, relates to the reduction in the cost of energy. So this time last year we was bringing a cost pressure forward based on our forecast increase based on what has been happening with energy prices nationally and internationally. They've come back down, and in effect that benefits then pass back down to the cost base. So that cost reversal in effect is built into the proposal. There's a savings associated with the re-procurement and the associated transformation work with the customer service centre contract. So again, quite a significant change in the cost base from last year, where we sit now. There's a review and realignment of the legal Lincolnshire fee rates. So we've work going on at the minute which we expect to provide a net benefit to the Directorate as a whole. Decommissioning of legacy IT systems. So again, that's through some of the work that's happening within that IT space to achieve those cost savings quicker, which help to then accommodate the other measures that have been proposed within the service. And lastly, just around insurance, as a result of the contracts re-tendering corporately, that provides benefits to the cost base within property. Just going to move on to capital. So in the report, I'd like to take you to table B on page 92. The services which form the Resources Directorate are not particularly capital intensive services when compared to major areas of spend like highways. However, that said, there is planned capital investment of 46.3 million in property and 32.4 million pounds in IT over the 11-year period from 23-4 to 2033-34. Sorry. The vast majority of this relates to block recurring capital investment in property maintenance and the IT infrastructure and refresh programme. So in effect, maintaining council assets and enabling the effective delivery of council services. The current programme has been adjusted to take into account rephasing and the proposal to distribute the built-up contingency balance to fund investment in emergent priority areas, which are considered fully in the council budget report too. Of this, there's £8.6 million which relates to schemes which are led by property, and that includes the proposal to develop Orchard House B. So the full list for that can be seen in paragraph 1.25. That brings me to the end of what I want to say in terms of presenting the report, so I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for your report. Do we have any questions on this report? No, I think you're getting away lightly today. No, I don't have any questions myself, actually, because it's a very well written, informative report. So, no, thank you for that. Do we? No further questions? No? Right, then I'll move to a proposal then. So I move that the board supports the report and ask that our comments, well, there haven't been any, are captured by Chiara and be shared with the executive ahead of its consideration of a decision. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Thank you. Thanks a lot. So we'll now move on to item 10, which is the approval to award a contract for the managed service of the council's multifunction devices. Oh, sorry. You're right? Yeah. Multifunction devices, MFDS. This report seeks the board's consideration and endorsement of the proposal for an approval to award a contract for the managed service of the council's multifunction devices, outlining the necessity to replace the expiring contract by the 31st of March 2024 and detailing the recommended course of action, including the approval to award a new contract and the delegation of decisions following a procurement exercise with the leader of the council set to make a decision between the 29th of January and the 2nd of February 2024, incorporating the board's perspectives into the Executive Council's deliberation on this matter. So our actions are that we consider the attached report to determine whether we support the recommendation to the leader of the council as set out on page 97 of the report, and to agree any additional comments to be passed on to the leader of the council in relation to this item. This report will be presented by Andrew Hansey, Head of Business Support. So over to you, Andrew, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Morning, everyone. So page 97 provides details of the report, and I'll just give you some highlights from that report. So as just been stated, the report sets out the proposed course of action following a procurement exercise that was taken at the end of last year for the provision of our MFDs. MFDs are basically printers, copies and scanners that we have across the organisation, including the approval of the award of a new contract and delegation of necessary decisions. So just to give some background, the current contract is with Konica Minolta. It expires on the 31st of March. We don't have any options to renew or extend that contract. The contract that we currently have in place is based on lease costs of the machines together with consumables and a cost per click. That cost depends on whether it is monoprint, black and white, or whether it is colour. Obviously, colour is more expensive for us. So the procurement exercise that we conducted last year was through the Crown Commercial Services Managed Service Print Provision Framework. We received 6 bids as part of that process, so had quite a good response to it. And in the bid, what we are looking for is a slightly different contract going forward. So we're looking for a 5-year contract with an option to extend 2 further periods of 12 months, but a fully managed service where the supplier is responsible for designing, implementing and managing the service to deliver our required outcomes. The pricing that we have set out would be based on usage only, so it's based on not based on leasing the machines, and there is no minimum volume guaranteed as part of the contract as well. The price would be fixed as well for the initial term of the contract, so the initial 5 years. We also expect there to be some capability to meet or exceed the current setup, the current machines that we have across the council. The fully managed model will provide us with much more flexibility going forward. So as we undertake property rationalisations or change the way that we work, we'll be able to move or remove machines, and also we will be able to change the type of machines that we have in place as well, depending on their usage levels. So from the bid perspective, as I said, we received 6 bids. There was a huge variance in the level of cost around those bids. The lowest was just over 175,000. The highest bid was 488,000. A huge variance there because of our requirement not to have a minimum guaranteed volume of activity, and some of the bidders reflected that within their costing models, where they put in quite a high cost if the levels of usage reduced below a certain point. We have evaluated the bids. The winning bidder has been identified as Hewlett-Packard Apogee. They are obviously a large multinational MFD provider, and their main office is based in Lincoln, which is really obviously quite good for us. Their bid was high quality. They scored 62.5% out of the 70% available for quality, so scored really highly around that. The estimated cost of the bid on current usage is, like I say, 175,000 a year, with a total contract over the 7 years of 1.225 million. As well as the highest quality bid, it was also the cheapest by some margin. So over the last few years, we have achieved significant reduction in usage in the terms of the current contract due to changes in how we work under smart working, our increased focus around digital and communicating in digital ways with our customers, and also through property rationalisation. Machines have been consolidated or removed wherever they can be. The initial cost of the current contract in year 1 was around about 480,000, and we've seen a reduction in that to about 230,000 in the current year. And the budget set for this year is £150,000. We have undertaken benchmark with other local authorities, including Norfolk, Hertfordshire, Derbyshire and Gloucestershire, which indicates that the bid does represent an advantageous price for the council for its MFDs. On pages 100 and 101, we have provided some details with regards to some proposed routes to potential cost savings. The most notable one of those is that part of the bid requirement was that the new supplier would undertake a full review of how we use our technology, where we could make savings or to change the way that we work to be able to achieve further cost savings. Additional ways to be able to reduce those include implementing a corporate MFD usage policy, targeted communications, promoting more digital communication as we go forward, and encouraging customers to communicate with us in a different way rather than paper-based. So that's a summary of the report. So the recommendations are obviously to approve the award of the contract to Hewlett-Packard Apogee for the provision of a fully managed service, delegating the authority to the Deputy Chief Executive and Executive Director for Resources to determine the final form and a new contract to approve and enter into the contract. Happy to take any questions. I've got Leanne here with me today as well, in case you ask any difficult procurement questions that I can't answer.
Do we have any questions on this report? No, I've got one. So given the nature of these printers, I'll call them printers, I'm not going MFDs, in the business, and obviously we're changing over suppliers by this contract, is there going to be a smooth transition that's not going to disrupt the nature and the business that the council do?
Yes, we have planned that in, and also working with colleagues in Serco to make sure that obviously we'll have to implement the new machines with new technology as well. So we have built in a 3-month phase program because we have quite a number of machines that we'll have to organise taking one out and putting a new one in simultaneously.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you. Are there any other comments? Mr. Kyle, please.
Just that, so the previous contract was 480,000 per year. This contract, so we've moved time on, that was back in 2017. Moving time on, it's about 175 per year in 2024. That seems significantly reduced. Are you happy you're getting the same service and it's all going to work in brilliant ways?
Yes, the reasons why it's come down so much is because of usage, because obviously we've been through the pandemic, we work in very different ways now, so usage of the machines is much less than it was back in 2017, 2018 when the contract was originally awarded. We've been through the process, we've looked at the quality, we've looked at the cost of it, and it's come out at a really good price for us.
Cool. And there was a bit where you said it, I might have heard it wrong, they look after the current machines or something. Do they? Or do they just, is Connor Minolta gone, Hewlett and Packard in?
Yes, so because it's a managed service, it's slightly different in that they are responsible for making sure that they have appropriate machines in the right places. And they'll work with us to be able to make sure that we put the right machine in to cope with the volume of activity that's done within that.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Brooks, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just wondering how this all fits in and how people using printers at home, whether if they're using their own printer, costs for that, or are people using printers at home included in this contract somehow?
So there are some standalone printers that we have in certain areas. They aren't part of this contract, they're standalone. But to be able to get a printer at home, it has to go through a specific approval process through IT and through my service to be able to determine whether people are eligible to be able to have those. So, that might be areas like planning who need to have a printer, or finance that need to print out reports, but we don't have a huge amount of it. The majority of our printing is done through these devices.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further comments? No. Mr. Kyle.
It would just be a comment just to say this sounds great and it's a great report. The fact it's coming from Lincoln, their main office is in Lincoln as well, I think is great. And I think there's knock-on thoughts for other services, including our own setting, where our contract for photocopying is coming to an end, and how this new Lincoln-based company could help out. Thanks for the report.
Thank you for that. So I will then move from the chair that the board supports the report and the option to approve the award of the contract to Hewlett Packard Apogee for the provision of a fully managed service for the council's multifunctional devices, and ask that our comments are captured by Kiara and these are shared with the executive ahead of its consideration of a decision. All those in favour, please. Thank you. That is unanimous. Thank you. So we'll now move on to item 11, which is Scrutiny Committee work programmes, and you'll find this report on pages 105 to 136 of the agenda pack, and it provides us with an update on the activity undertaken by the Adults and Community Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee, the Environment Economy Scrutiny Committee, the Health Scrutiny Committee for Lincolnshire, and the Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee. It is the board's primary responsibility to oversee the work programmes of the other scrutiny committees and ensuring satisfaction with each committee's overall work programme and planned activities rather than engaging in detailed discussions on specific items. So the report invites us to review and comment on the contents of the report, and 1, record our satisfaction with the activity undertaken and then 2, endorse the activity planned for 23-24. And this report will be presented in 4 parts because obviously we moved 2 from the last meeting that was cancelled. So the first item is adults, and that will be presented by Councillor Hugo Marfleet, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just really like to refer to page 109 of the agenda and the 4 items considered last week. Budget proposal for 2024 to 25. The committee supported the budget proposals, and its statement to the executive included reference to the importance of prevention and the emphasis on budget pressures of 9.4 million, with an increasing number of self-funders seeking support from the council. The other next item was the Director of Public Health Annual Report for the 2023. The Director's Report is titled Ageing Better in Lincolnshire, Adding Life to Years. 23% of Lincolnshire's population is over 65 compared to an average of England of 18%, which presents challenges for local services. The committee referred to reducing isolation for elderly people, and the committee will be following up on this item in July on the progress with the director's recommendation. I mean, just on that, Derek actually does write some very good reports over the last 5 years and picks up different themes, and I think they're very good. I think the one thing, though, we did sort of just note is to make sure that in some sense it's not just a report that then ends up on a dusty shelf. He puts a lot of work into it and accumulates a lot of information, and I think we sort of plan to sort of follow it through a bit more this year to sort of make sure that various aspects are embedded into the system. But I think also, you know, with ageing better for Lincolnshire, you know, people have got to take a bit of self-responsibility as well and look after themselves. The other area was the Care Quality Commission's assessment of Lincolnshire County Council. A series of actions were outlined in response to the CQC's report, which together with other transformation activities will be incorporated into the department's improvement plan, which we'll consider in June. Overview of care providers management. This details items provided on the numerous contract managed by the commercial team to support adult social care and public health. There are over 600 individual contracts that cover more than 1,000 services delivered locally. One of the things that we just also highlighted there is that a lot of these contracts get awarded out, and there's perhaps we could maybe do more to start to centralise some of these certainly some of the sort of more public outfacing, where they all become on one, say, community hub, or at least share the one Lincolnshire estate, rather than sort of all, which generally happens is everyone goes off and finds their own accommodation, rents it out accordingly, and it might not necessarily be in the best location. And I've sort of made reference to, actually, when I was touring Grimsby on the devolution consultation, we ended up in a place called, keep calling it Connect 4, but actually it's Centre 4. But, and it was wonderful it was in the Nunsthorpe estate, which is a deprived area in Lincolnshire, well, in Grimsby. And it was an old school, and it's now a thriving community hub where well-being and there's everything there. It's easy to park, it's right in the middle, it's even got farm animals and donkeys and all sorts of bits and bobs for the youth in that area. But even when I was sort of in there in the canteen, actually there was people there that were from my area of Holton-le-Clay. And I said, how often do you come here? And they say, well, I come every day, because at £2.20 for a 2-course meal in a warm environment and great, it was brilliant. And they'd got classes of Tai Chi, and as anyone saw Look North, there was Tim there doing a bit of Tai Chi with the sort of elderly population of basically getting people to move. And it really was thriving, and it was really quite inspirational, actually. So it's a sort of a good model to look at, potentially putting more of these services, and in effect that's what Derek was alluding to a bit in his director's report, that, you know, sometimes putting all these services together makes it a lot more easy to access, and actually people support people. When they're there, they help other people and do other things. So there's some good stuff there. Future Works Programme, referring to page 110, as I've already said, the items on 17th of January have generated several items for April, June and July's meeting. So I will just confirm those. On the 17th of April, the committee will receive an update on winter pressures, including intermediate care, and an item on NHS health checks, which are commissioned by Public Health. On the 5th of June, we are due to receive the Adult Care and Community Wellbeing Improvement Plan, the Lincolnshire All-Age Autism Strategy, and the Budget Outturn report for the service. On the 26th of July, in addition to the performance report already listed, we shall be following up 2 items from the 17th of January, which is the Director of Public Annuals Report and the Overview of Contract Management. And finally, there's been an item added on the 28th of February's agenda for a pre-decision scrutiny extension of integrated lifestyle support services. So there is a bit of a theme in the whole of that. It's called Get Yourself Fit for Older Age in Life, really. But and that's, I suppose, got to be the preventative strategy to try and reduce the pressures that are coming towards adult social care. But other than that, all in good order. And thank you very much.
Thank you for that. We'll now move on to the environment and economy, and this will be presented by Kiara on behalf of the Chairman, Councillor Ian Carrington. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This update is brought to you on behalf of the Chairman and Vice Chairman of the Environment and Economy Scrutiny Committee, who sadly were not able to join us today. The committee has met twice since the last update in September, on the 24th of October and 28th of November, and most recently on the 16th of January. As I take the report as read, I will only focus on the last and most recent meeting, where the committee considered the revenue and capital budget proposals for the Council's Environment and Economy Services, as well as a report on the Town Centre Improvement Scrutiny Review carried out by Scrutiny Panel A, which was pertinent to the Executive Response and Action Plan. In relation to the first, the committee expressed concerns about potential market price changes in waste disposal, questioned preparedness for the Environment Act impacts, and raised apprehensions of a flood response funds. Officers acknowledged waste market volatility, ongoing work on separated food waste with DEFRA, and executive approved $4 million for flood alleviation. Additionally, the committee voiced trepidation about reduced government funding, sought details on council tax optimisation amid rising bank finance rates, and received insights into contingency planning, financial forecasting, and treasury strategy, which is scrutinised by this board, highlighting the use of internal balances to mitigate borrowing impact. Now, with reference to the latter report, the committee was guided through the report and was informed that the proposed outline plan, which commenced in April 2020, which will be commencing in April 2024, primarily for market towns across Lincolnshire, and the proposed actions were proportionate regarding officer availability, the statutory rules of the council, and enhanced activities. The plan was overall described as a whole system approach dedicated to improving our town centres. Members expressed encouragement in the opportunities being offered to improve Lincolnshire's town centres and requested that updates on the implementation of the action plan be considered by the committee when appropriate. Finally, in relation to the published work programme, I would like to note the following 2 changes, which are actually in fact additions. There's a 6-monthly update on the work of the Thedlethorpe Geological Disposal Facility Working Group, which has now been added to our April agenda. And secondly, the report on transition of local enterprise partnerships has been deferred to our May meeting. And this concludes my update to you, so thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that update. We'll now move on to health. Now we'll come to questions in a moment, please, Karen Lee. Councillor Lee, thank you. So we'll now move on to health scrutiny, which is Councillor Carl Macy, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and I'll take the report as read, if I may. So I'd like to refer to page 120 of the agenda and the 4 items considered yesterday, which are listed in error with a title of the 6th of December. Starting with East Midlands Ambulance Service, they submitted a full set of papers to the committee, which included their clinical strategy for the next 5 years. A range of topics were raised, including staff sickness rates, the impact of winter storms, clinical decision-making, and sustaining improvements in performance. A key challenge is the impact of hospital handover times, which should not exceed 30 minutes in total. As an example, for the month of December 2023, over 2,000 hours of ambulance response time was lost because of handovers at Lincoln County and Pilgrim hospitals, taking longer than 30 minutes. Although this is an improvement compared to the previous figures, it remains a significant challenge for health systems. Moving on to the non-emergency patient transport, since the 1st of July, EMAS has been providing non-emergency patient transport in Lincolnshire. EMAS's contract with the ICB focuses on overarching objectives, including patient satisfaction and a local incentive scheme, rather than key performance indicators. The committee has requested more evidence in the next report in 6 months' time on how EMAS is performing. The committee is also seeking an item in the future on broader patient transport issues, for example, for those outside the nationally set criteria for the patient transport service. We had an item as well on the impact of NHS on asylum seekers at the former RAF Scampton base. This item comprised a written report from the local NHS, with a representative from the Home Office joining the meeting to respond to questions. Separate funding will be provided to the ICB for primary care services and mental health services. The committee posed a series of questions to the representative from the Home Office which could not be answered at the meeting, and the outstanding responses to these questions are being followed up. The Humber and Lincolnshire Joint Overview Committee, there is some information on the Joint Committee on pages 123 of this agenda item report. The committee considered the full response from the Joint Committee to the consultation affecting hospitals in Scunthorpe and Grimsby. Yesterday, the committee recorded its concerns over the Joint Committee process, in particular the fact that 2 of the 5 council areas involved in the Joint Committee were minimally impacted by the proposals. The committee also confirmed, in line with its own response to the consultation, that it did not support the proposals. A decision by the NHS is expected in March 2024. And moving on to the new regulations and guidance from the Secretary of State. Before moving the future programme, I would like to refer to the publication of the new health scrutiny regulations on the 9th of January, which have removed the power of referral from the health scrutiny committees to the Secretary of State from the 31st of January. The power of referral will be replaced by a provision enabling any member of the public or organisation to request that the Secretary of State call in any proposed reconfigurations. The Secretary of State will only consider call-ins if all efforts have been made to resolve the matter locally, which would include the involvement of local health scrutiny committees. And very finally, the future programme, again referring to pages 121 and changes to the future work programme. The update from North West Anglia is now coming on the 20th of March and has been replaced on the 21st of February by an item from United Lincolnshire Hospitals Trust on pressure at the Trust, including Lincoln County Hospital. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that update. And finally, Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee, Councillor Brooks, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I will take the report and Appendix D from page 124 onwards, on which gives detailed account on items considered since September. And that also provides information on our work programme up to July 2024 as read, and will only update you with the changes to the Forward Works programme since the publication of the agenda pack. In our next meeting on January the 29th, we will consider a pre-decision report on civil parking enforcement 2024 contract and notice processing solution. The report addresses the conclusion of the current civil parking enforcement contract, recommends replacement options available to Lincolnshire County Council's Highway Service, and seeks approval from the Executive Councillor for Highways Transport and IT to proceed with the recommended option for implementing new arrangements. Furthermore, a pre-decision scrutiny report on the bus service improvement plan and Network North funding has been added to our April agenda. The report will provide detailed account of our spending plans included in the bus service improvement plan, and the information will be shared with DFT by June 2024 as requested. This concludes my update to you and members of this board, Mr. Chairman, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Lee, you want to come in? Sorry.
Thanks, Chair. It's a comment, not a question, so I'd like to reserve my right to speak later if I need to ask a question. At the moment, I don't, but I'm just a bit concerned that there's nobody, neither the Chair or the Vice Chair from Environment and Economy. I find these really useful meetings, actually, to find out what's going on, and you need the chance to be able to ask the relevant people questions. So really, I think that they ought to be treating these meetings as a priority, and I would ask going forward in terms of just keeping us informed, as well as accountability, public accountability, that one or the other does attend every quarter. Thank you.
Kiara, do you want to come in on that?
Yes, just for the record, I would like to address this. So, Councillor Carrington, and this has been on the record of Environment and Economy Scrutiny Committee, as he wished to pass that message on. He has been he has been quite ill with COVID. He has not recovered since. He was hoping to be fit to be here with you today and answer those questions. And unfortunately, Councillor Griggs was notified at the very last minute and was not able to make it today due to his teaching responsibilities in his job. So they do apologise for their inability to be here, but I will be taking any questions back to them and they will be responding to whatever questions you pose for them. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. On that basis, I send my good wishes for his best recovery. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further comments or questions? No. So I'd like to thank all the presenters for their detailed reports, and I move that the board's satisfaction in the work undertaken be recorded and the board endorse the work programme as these have been developed to date. All those in favour, please. Thank you. That is unanimous. Thank you. So we'll now move on to item 13, which is the final one on the agenda, and that's the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board work programme. The report is on pages 137 to 146 of the pack and provides an overview of the contents of our own work programme. We do not normally debate this item, and our action is to note its contents. Therefore, I move that the report be noted with the caveat of any necessary amendments identified since the publication of this agenda will be incorporated by our designated scrutiny officer. Can you please raise your hand if you agree? Thank you. That is unanimous. So that is agreed. So I will now close the meeting. Thank you all for your attendance and safe journey home. Thank you.